And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Kanell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live on CBS Sports Network. Fired up to get you set for next Monday's national championship game between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We got keys to the victory for both teams coming up. But first, as we sit here less than a week out, my question, gentlemen, is what are those questions that are burning? So, Danny, get us started. What's a burning question you have about this matchup as we sit here on Wednesday?
How about this, Chip? I have the same burning question for Notre Dame coming into the national championship game is the same question I had for them in week 1 before their game against Texas A&M. What is this offensive line going to work with? Because if you remember, Charles Jagasaw hurt him, was named out for the season before that game. Then they lost another starting left tackle. So this offensive line, which has had so many different mixed pairings because of injuries all across the board, the latest being Anthony Knapp, how do they once again line up under center? And by the way, Jagasaw did play some in the semifinal game. So does he play again at guard where he was there? Do they bump him out to left tackle? What does this mismatched, unit look like, and how effective are they? And are they able to defy the odds once again and overcome all the injuries that they've seen along the offensive line this season?
And that's kind of, we kind of have to trust the resiliency of this team at this point. I mean, they've been losing just player after player after player after player, both sides of the ball. They got themselves a tough test, of course, going up against that Ohio State defensive front as well. Bud, what is your burning question?
Chip, first of all, I totally agree with you and Danny's burning question, but I really want to know, can Notre Dame do it? Can Notre Dame, who leads the country in man coverage, can they line up, play single high, kind of like Nick Saban's old favorite coverage? Can they play cover one against this Ohio State team? Because the last two teams who've actually held Ohio State in check, Texas and Michigan, they were humble. They're like, we can't do it. We're going to play a lot of two-eye shell. We're going to let our front eat. We're going to see how this goes. Notre Dame's like, you know what? Against Penn State, they tried a little bit of that. They didn't want to allow the explosive play with Andy Kotelnicki's creative offense. Penn State ran the ball on them, and they're like, you know what? We kind of need to go ahead and just do what we do. Does Notre Dame have enough confidence in what they do to do that against Ohio State? Because I'm really not sure if they can, because there's kind of Jeremiah Smith. You guys might have seen him. He's not bad.
All right, Danny, can you take us through the quarterback side of that from what Bud's saying? Because what is Notre Dame then going to be trying to show Will Howard, and what are they going to be trying to offer for him when it comes to the man coverage, the zone coverage, the different ways you're going to play it, and what are they trying to present? What will Will Howard then be challenged with?
I would expect Al Golden to do what he's done all season long. Like, you don't want to try to be something you're not, but I think they're going to try to test Will Howard's knowledge of the system, knowledge of his pass protections, knowledge of where to go with the football quickly, because sometimes you only have a 6-man protection dialed up. They bring 7. You have a hot route built in. So where are you supposed to go with it? You might have one where you feel like you're max protected, and then they drop out, and it's a zone blitz, and they show blitz, and they drop back into coverage. All of those types of things are the things that I would expect Will Howard to have to be on his P's and Q's to be able to know exactly where to go with the football, where he's protected, where he can take those shots, because he might have Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Buka in man-to-man coverage, and they're winning on the outside. But if you got a guy barreling down on you because you didn't account for him, or your offensive line didn't see him, or he became an unblocked, rusher, you have to know your responsibilities and where to go. And at times, I would expect Will Howard to maybe check protection at the line of scrimmage. He's been in this offense long enough. They've seen a lot of tape of Notre Dame's defense to know, all right, I'm sliding my protection one way, but look, they're coming right into it. And I don't have enough guys, so maybe let me switch the slide and go the other direction to account for the blitz the other way. All those types of kind of cat and mouse games I would expect to take place with Al Golden against Will Howard, because I think Will Howard's going to get tested in his knowledge of those protections. As much as like we talk about the man-to-man coverage, I don't think they sit back and play the same style all game long. I think they're going to mix it up and try to keep him on his toes.
And great teams, great coaches, all the time to be able to prepare and kind of, overthink this like through and through. I love the idea that, a coach is going to say to the media is like, well, we just need to be us. That's all we're worried about. Forget that. these guys are going insane right now trying to put together every little possible wrinkle. So longtime listeners, viewers of the Cover 3 podcast know that I've been very hung up on my Ohio State third quarters, right? You know, like Ohio State, one of the best third quarter teams in America. The Ohio State third quarter bet did not cash against Texas. David Benda deciding that he wanted to ruin it for America, dropping in and getting that pass. I maintain if they score a touchdown on that drive, we're good. But that's to the side. Because what we've run into is something that's very unique. Ohio State, a very good third quarter team, but Notre Dame is the best team in the country in the middle 8. And if you're unfamiliar, the middle 8 is the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. They have been outscoring opponents, wait for it, 148-17. 148-17 over that 8-minute stretch right on either side of halftime. That is a plus 133 margin. That is 8.86 points per game. And I just wonder if that's going to be so important in terms of ways that Notre Dame can climb back in this, because Ohio State has a talent advantage. Ohio State has a little bit of a health advantage. Ohio State is a favorite of more than a touchdown, but Notre Dame can win this football game. And one of the ways they can win is by trying to win at the margins. And so I wonder if can Notre Dame, which, by the way, really flipped the Penn State game and the Georgia game by being able to win that middle 8, I wonder if they're going to be able to get it done again here. But do you see a path where Notre Dame would be able to do it? I know coin toss might have a little bit of part of this if we're going to be technical about it. But do you see a path for the Irish to be able to win the middle 8 again in the last game of the season?
I mean, like Chip, certainly. I think middle 8 is something that teams can emphasize. That you can probably really try to like hey, let's lock in. Much like a script, like maybe we have certain plays we run before the middle 8 or coming out of half if you're a really good second half adjustment, type team like Notre Dame has been this year. But let's also focus on how they've done it. Notre Dame has led the nation in scoring on defense and special teams this year. That has been a pretty critical part. Like go back to that Georgia game, kickoff return, right? And then they didn't actually score on defense there, but they did get a strip sack that led to a one-play touchdown drive deep in the red zone. So if they're going to pull it off against Ohio State, against the Jim Knowles defense that is really pretty good, I think they're going to have turnovers and special teams type scores.
They've held the pen. Notre Dame has a couple games back-to-back out of halftime. The Marcus Freeman line, which is epic. When he told his team, because they were trailing, it did not look good for Notre Dame against Penn State in the first half. And he comes out at halftime message was, history is written by conquerors, and we're holding the pen. Epic line from Winston Churchill that Marcus Freeman relayed to his team. And I will say this, they looked like a different team coming out of the locker room. I mean, we were sitting with all our Penn State producers that all root for the Nittany Lions, and I was telling them, you guys got this game. Like, you are manhandling them. This is a physically dominated game so far. And what did Notre Dame do out of the halftime, out of the locker room? They marched it down the field on Penn State with 1 pass and 7 runs, marched it right down in for the touchdown with Jeremiah Love dragging a couple defenders in the end zone. And then it was like, oh, we got a ball game. So it is one of those critical, important scenarios. You had the return, as you guys mentioned, against Georgia right after the half. That is one that will be huge. Those middle 8 are critical, including coming out of the locker room. When there's a halftime, a little bit longer, you're kind of lingering, there's adjustments made. You got to ramp things back up and meet the intensity of the opponent, or else it can shape the turn of the game.
All right, from the look at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, we will then pivot here in just a little bit. So coming up on the other side, what are those keys to the victory for Ohio State in this matchup? We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, looking ahead to next Monday's matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame for the College Football Playoff National Championship. But let's look at those Ohio State Buckeyes, because the form that they showed against Tennessee and against Oregon looked like they were just going to bulldoze their way through the entire college football playoff. Yet there they were with only a 7-point lead in the final minutes of the semifinals. Texas had the ball at the 1. they punch that in and send that thing to overtime. Who knows? They might not even be here. That wasn't the case. Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, and of course, Jack Sawyer flipping the script and getting that script Ohio onto Atlanta. So looking at the Buckeyes, Bud, what stands out to you as a key to victory for Ohio State?
Jim, I think you're going to have to look at the personnel use from the Buckeyes. If you take a look at what they did against Tennessee and Oregon, they played a lot of 12 personnel. I think they liked the matchups there, created some interesting wrinkles in the run game. It also kind of was a bit of eye candy that they were able to free up Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, especially Smith, on the outside. Against Texas, though, they weren't able to do that as much. And I think that's because Texas linebackers really could run. I think you probably see a bit of a return to that in this game, because I don't think Notre Dame's linebackers are quite as athletic as what we saw from Texas or a month ago against Michigan. So probably more 12 personnel, a little bit heavier, make Notre Dame declare what they're going to do. And then we've talked about it on Cover 3 a lot this year. Will Howard doesn't look quite as athletic as he did last year. I don't know if there's something going on there, but there's no more saving Will Howard. So I would expect to see Will Howard's run step up a couple times in this game, maybe 4 or 5 carries for him.
Danny, what do you have your eye on?
I would say for Ohio State, I think they need to stay aggressive, right? I mean, and we talked a little bit in our big game preview you can hear on the Cover 3 podcast, where, the Michigan game, it felt like they had so much more talent. They were clearly the better team, where you just kind of didn't want to screw it up. And sure enough, what do you know? When you play a little bit conservative and you don't, kind of take advantage of your weapons and you play not to lose, they sure enough got beat. And Will Howard has 2 interceptions. They're not able to run the football, and it turns into an ugly game. I think Ohio State has to keep the mindset that they came into this playoffs with, chip on the shoulder, be aggressive. And it has to be a patient aggressive. Like, you can't be reckless with it. And that's where I think some of it does come back to Will Howard, where, yeah, they're going to call some shot plays. And if they're there, take them. By all means, take them. But call those aggressive plays. And maybe a play action on first down where if it's not there, hit the check down. Don't try to force the ball. But I would say as a team on both sides of the ball, stay aggressive, keep the aggressive mindset that you're going to dominate this team. And you probably will, because you do have matchup edges all over the field.
Danny, Jeremiah Smith held in check by Texas's defense. And maybe the Buckeyes were fine with that. If you're going to slant a defense entirely Jeremiah Smith's way and track him as he's moving around, well, you're just going to open up opportunities for other extremely gifted NFL-bound skill players as well. Do you think that Ohio State needs Jeremiah Smith to be more involved to win this game against Notre Dame?
No. And again, it's dictated by the defense that's played. If they come out and try to mimic Texas's game plan, shade help over the top, bracket coverage, give a lot of attention to Jeremiah Smith, it goes back to not forcing the issue. You've got to recognize that as a quarterback and go through your progressions. Because I guarantee you, Jeremiah Smith is the number one option on a lot of play concepts that the Buckeyes have. But if he has help over the top, if he's double covered, then you got to get on him and get through your progression. So I don't think he has to have a monster game. I feel he might, he's got that capabilities. And there might be at times when Chip Kelly might tell Will Howard, you know what? We're going to take a shot. It's going to be in the end zone to Jeremiah Smith. He's going to catch it or nobody's going to care about. We don't care if it's bracket. He is that good. But outside of some of those shot plays, they might have just to force feed the ball to Jeremiah Smith. I don't think he has to have a monster game because, like you said, if he's attracting that much attention, that means you got great matchups at other positions on the field.
I think I agree with Danny with everything he said. The one caveat I would say, if Notre Dame does decide to play really aggressive and they're not bracketing Smith, if he doesn't win against that look, then this offense actually could be in real trouble. Like if they find a way to cover Jeremiah Smith one-on-one and maybe limit him to 6 for 75, but it's 6 for 75 with like one guy on him and not having quite as much help. And this is probably fantasy land. Like if I'm Al Golden, I'm definitely going to help out Jeremiah Smith, just how he's played so far. But if they can find a way to do that, then this Notre Dame defense really could hold the Ohio State offense in check. That's a lot easier said than done.
I'm looking at first downs for Ohio State. I'm looking at trying to get positive plays. I'm looking at seeing whether the success that Penn State had against Notre Dame's defense in the first half, when it looked like Singleton and Allen were just going to bowl this team over, whether or not you're going to be able to get that from Henderson and Judkins, because you have so much explosive ability all over the field that if you are able to run the ball in what I would say is like a traditional set and not have to really go deep in the playbook, I mean, night, this thing's over. It's going to be an evening of a coronation for Ohio State winning their 9th national championship. However, if you find yourself in the same scenario that you had against Michigan, that you had against Nebraska early in the year, when you just could not run the ball effectively, especially on first down, now I think that's going to be something that I've definitely got my eye on. And I just keep coming back to this 1-2 punch. I mean, Danny, doesn't it feel like Quinshon Judkins, TreVeyon Henderson in this run is like everything that we expected when you had an all Big Ten running back and then like all SEC running back, and you put them in the same backfield? It feels like just now we're starting to see it all come to fruition, right?
Yes, Quinshon Judkins been the closer down inside the red zone or in the goal line situations to punch it in. And then you see the explosiveness of TreVeyon Henderson with a little screen pass that goes for 75 yards because you caught a blitz that didn't look great. He's got that type of big play potential that's out there. So, yeah, I think these two have been absolutely, later on this afternoon, I'm doing a little segment on most impactful players in this matchup on both sides of the ball. And I want to do TreVeyon Judkins. So I want to combine them into one player because they're like, you don't want to do both of them because that kind of favors Ohio State. But both of them together make up this juggernaut backfield, which is close to, unstoppable, especially the way they finished the season.
It's funny you say that, DK. Literally just a little bit ago here on CBS Sports Network, I was on the Early Edge College Football Show. We were picking offensive, defensive MVPs, and Eric Cohen said he's splitting his bet. He's doing like a little bit of TreVeyon at 12-1 and a little bit of Quinshon at 16-1, and I don't hate it. I think that might be a great way. Like you're betting on Quinshon Henderson, TreVeyon Judkins. I love it. Yep. Whole way. All right, from Ohio State to the underdog, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We will give you the keys to victory for Marcus Freeman's squad and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Looking ahead to next week's game between Ohio State and Notre Dame for the College Football Playoff National Championship. We've given you our burning questions, our keys to victory for Ohio State. But what about Notre Dame on some type of run right now, taking down the SEC champion, the Big Ten runner-up, one of the best teams that we had in terms of at-large in the first round? So, Bud, what's the key? What's a key to victory for Notre Dame to pull off the upset?
Chip, honestly, I think it is going to have to be Riley Leonard throwing the ball after he is scrambled out of pressure. I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that the Irish are going to allow some pressure given who's out on the offensive line, although with Jagasaw being back, and I'm assuming he's going to play left tackle, they listed him as a on the depth chart that was recently released for the Irish. Remember, he was supposed to be the starting left tackle to start the season before he was injured and missed basically the entire season up until now. And Leonard, his escapability is awesome. He's probably the best at escaping pressure that we've seen in college football, probably since like an Anthony Richardson. But the thing is, that won't be enough against Ohio State. He has to escape pressure and then make something actually happen with his arm. I doubt that Ohio State is going to lose to Notre Dame with Riley Leonard passing within structure. But if he breaks structure, if he breaks contain, beats the pressure, and then finds a way to actually get the ball down the field via the pass, then I think Notre Dame's got a shot. I mean, it's easier said than done, but to me, that's probably what has to happen here.
Or some superhuman type runs as well. You brought up Anthony Richardson, or going back to Johnny Manziel, who kind of played a lot of off-script football. And like, he really does make a difference. He really is elusive. I mean, there were a couple times against Penn State, felt like it was going to be a sack. He scrambles away. And sometimes those hidden yards that you save, not taking a sack, throwing it away. But I agree with you. He's going to have to connect on one or two of those big plays in order for them to pull off this upset. Because the flip side, I do not envision Riley Leonard sitting from the pocket, throwing from 300 yards and just beating Ohio State that way. I think he's got to have some good yards rushing the football and then a couple big plays when he's escaping the pocket, like you said.
Yeah, the stat sheet says 5 sacks for Penn State in that game, and it felt like it could have been more with just the way that he was able to elude pressure right there. Danny, what's the key to victory in your eyes?
I got 2 for Notre Dame. I think they have to win the turnover margin. Like, you can't see Jack Sawyer get in the backfield or Riley Leonard coughing the ball off or Jeremiah Love. They've got to force some turnovers, maybe get a Will Howard interception, force some turnovers. And then how about special teams? That's an area I think they did have the kickoff return against Georgia to kind of put him back in that game. I would include kicking in that aspect. Mitch Jeter had the game winner. He's going to have to probably have a big game in case they can't finish off drives. They're going to need to be perfect. It just feels like Notre Dame is going to have to play a very clean game and the turnovers and have some help in the special teams in order to pull off the upset.
I would say third down excellence. Notre Dame did not move the ball great against Penn State, but they did find a way to convert third downs, stay on the field. If the Irish win, they need to have this game played at a snail's pace, guys. They do not want to play a tempo game and give Ohio State 10 or 11 drives. You want like 7 or 8, almost an Army tempo for the Irish here. So finding a way to stay on the field in third down.
Yeah, 10 of 14 or somewhere around that. And there was like a streak of like 8 of 10 in a row for Notre Dame on third down. And you mentioned 7 or 8. I thought you were going to say 7 or 8 minutes, because those were the kinds of drives that Notre Dame had in the second half that just deflated Penn State and allowed them to climb back into that game. That's something that I think huge for Notre Dame, right in line with y'all. Take care of the football, time of possession, win on third down. I mean, the treasure map is there, Marcus. If we can figure it out, can't y'all? I mean, just go do it, and you'll be all good. For so much more on the College Football Playoff National Championship between Ohio State and Notre Dame, come and check us out on the Cover 3 podcast. We still got best bets. We still got props and so much more. You can check it out at youtube.com/Cover3 or download the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just scan that QR code on the screen.